Hello there. Brexit has already cost four British Prime Ministers their offices. David Cameron said goodbye with a happy song on his lips, and his successors carried heavy promises that could not be fulfilled, although some of them they made themselves, so who cares? David Cameron was not a die-hard opponent of Britain's membership of the EU, but the Prime Minister made the mistake of giving in to the radical wing of the Tories and agreeing to a referendum on Brexit, probably in the tacit expectation that it would fail. When Britain voted to leave the EU in 2016, Cameron stood duped and declared his resignation. When he had finished his declaration of resignation, he turned and went back to the office singing a happy little song. And surrounding microphones caught this, if you remember. Cameron's cheerful disposition that day was widely taken both as reflecting a general frivolity on the part of the outgoing Prime Minister, but also as a symbol of a lack of seriousness in the fight to stay in the EU. On the one hand, it was a surprise that then Theresa May, an original opponent of Brexit, followed Cameron and thus took on the task of implementing the exit. But with Boris Johnson, the most important voice in the Brexit campaign, to everyone's surprise, decided not to run, so May prevailed relatively quickly in the successor election. Johnson initially moved into her cabinet as Foreign Secretary, but his loyalty to May was still very limited in view of his own ambitions for the office of Prime Minister. Even in his affable manner, he remained a permanent alternative to the extremely matter-of-fact May. However, the implementation of Brexit proved to be a real millstone on the Prime Minister's neck. In Parliament and in her own party, there was a bitter fight over the exit agreement with Brussels and concessions to the EU. In parliamentary votes, large parts of her own parliamentary group went off the rails, so that May finally announced her resignation in 2019 after defeat in the lower house. Her party friends also resented her for calling early parliamentary elections in 2017, in which the Tories lost an absolute majority of seats in Parliament. So then came the hour of Boris Johnson, who had previously withdrawn from the cabinet and worked harder to succeed May. Johnson quickly prevailed in the party's internal elections and from then on backed the mantra-like motto, "Get Brexit done," so implement Brexit. However, this proved to be extremely difficult for him too, especially given the majority in Parliament. Johnson called a snap general election at the end of 2019, which gave the Tories an overwhelming victory because he lied like hell and promised whatever he could. An agreement with the EU on Brexit was reached at the last minute, but disputes remain, notably over the treatment of Northern Ireland and the fishing rights, and continue to fuel tensions with Brussels and debates within Britain. In addition, dealing with a corona pandemic overshadowed Johnson's tenure. It exacerbated the profound economic consequences of Brexit, which soon became apparent, although they tried to smokescreen everything with corona. But the office cost him that Johnson and his party-loving circle had not adhered to the restrictions they imposed on the population at the height of COVID, and Partygate and further scandals, of course, in the faction, and Johnson's, to put it mildly, lax handling of the truth, led to the fact that in the summer of this year, more and more ministers resigned from Johnson's allegiance and resigned. Johnson then resigned on July 7th, and former Secretary of State Liz Truss won the race to succeed Johnson with promises aimed at the right wing and the libertarian wing of the party. She wanted to counter the meanwhile deep economic crisis, which had been exacerbated by the Ukraine war that already was running because of Brexit, with massive tax cuts, trigger a massive growth spurt, and at the same time alleviate social hardships with a long-term cap on energy prices. However, she left it open how she wanted to finance this in the midst of a deep economic crisis. Her finance minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer Kwasi Kwarteng, thought the same when he set about implementing the election promises from September and in September. The pound then fell dramatically and the British Central Bank had to intervene. Truss and Kwarteng hastily dropped the plans, but the market's confidence was already gone. Truss, in an act of desperation, fired Kwarteng, but when his successor Jeremy Hunt completed the fiscal U-turn, abandoning all of Truss' plans, She now lost the backing of the wing that had brought her to power. After just 45 mostly chaotic days in office, Truss resigned as the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history. And now we have Rishi Sunak. Let's see how long he will stay on that post. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.